When a bear implores a soldier for assistance, the following unreal event occurs. Three soldiers drop their rifles in shock as a mature brown bear appears, raced directly to their commander's office after breaking past their security fence, and then did something that no wild animal had ever done before. It bent its head and waited. Even the hardest military personnel couldn't contain their tears when they learnt why this 800-pound predator risked death to seek human assistance. Lieutenant Scott. Throughout his 15 years in the service, Parker had witnessed a number of bizarre incidents, but nothing he had seen could account for what was occurring at Outpost 23, which is tucked away in the harsh wilderness of Alaska. Their stronghold has had to contend with everything from intense blizzards to illegal aircraft, but a bear purposefully breaching their defenses to demonstrate submission? This was entirely unheard of. With motion-sent ERS electric fencing, 24-hour armed patrols, and other security measures, the base was among the safest in the area. The main objective was to use 15 highly skilled soldiers and cutting-edge equipment to patrol a large area of wilderness that borders sensitive areas. They took pride in their monitoring equipment's ability to identify threats long before they reached their perimeter. But on this icy morning, all of their advanced security systems were insignificant in comparison to the resolve of a desperate mother bear. The base's alarms had just stopped going off when she showed up with a purpose that would soon become evident to everyone present, rather than with hostility or fear. What transpired over the course of the following 72 hours would not only challenge all of these seasoned soldiers' preconceived notions about wild animals, but it would also result in a revelation that would rock the military establishment as a whole. Lieutenant Parker was going to discover that the most daring deeds can occasionally originate from the most unlikely places. Lieutenant Parker's first, the natural reaction was to neutralize any threat that compromised their security by following regular military procedure. Yet something about this bear's behavior caused him to pause. Rather of charging or attacking, the enormous beast stayed in a submissive posture, sometimes raising its head to express. Sergeant James Miller, the base's wildlife expert, immediately noted the remarkable sounds that reverberated throughout the quiet area, almost like pleading. Brown bears were notorious for their violent, territorial behavior, particularly when cornered, and they never voluntarily approached human settlements. This bear was disobeying every wild law they were aware of, unless they were looking for food. They also never displayed submissive behavior towards humans. As the morning went on, more peculiar aspects about the bear's behavior became apparent. Its fur was matted with snow and ice, indicating that it had traveled a considerable distance. Its paw prints in the snow revealed that it had circled the base several times before making its frantic entrance. But what was most remarkable was how fearless it demonstrated that even in the presence of armed soldiers, the bear's eyes seemed to possess a sense of urgency and intellect that made even the most seasoned soldiers. Lieutenant Parker, who had served in many difficult circumstances in the past, told his men to hold their fire while maintaining their positions. One needed a fresh strategy, and the bear's desperate behavior indicated that there had to be a reason why they had met. Because of this strange behavior, the base's security cameras provided additional perplexing information. Video from the night before demonstrated that the bear had been watching the base for hours, observing patrol patterns and personnel movements. This degree of strategic behavior was unheard of. It was nearly as though Sergeant Miller saw that the bear had prepared its approach and was waiting for the ideal opportunity to make a theatrical entrance. Although no young bears could be seen in any of the security footage, the nursing mother's behavior suggested that she had cubs somewhere. This detail changed. Everything must have been bad if she had abandoned her cubs to seek human assistance. The issue only got more interesting when the bear's body temperature revealed symptoms of fatigue in the thermal imaging from their perimeter cameras, indicating that she had been traveling for. The footsteps in the snow, which extended far into the wilderness along a curving path that appeared to indicate many hours of repose, confirmed this theory. Have a clear destination, and as the hours went by, the bear's behavior grew more urgent. She would get up and take a few steps in the direction of Then, while continuing to make those same imploring noises, Wilderness assumed her submissive posture as though she were attempting to convey a particular message. The base's communication officer reported the incident to Regional Command in an attempt to persuade them to follow her, but the response they got just made the situation worse. Tension. This was entirely uncharted ground. No other military facility or civilian community in the region had ever reported anything comparable. Lieutenant Parker was aware that military protocol forbade him from leaving the base on unapproved missions, particularly two. After 6 hours of following a wild animal, he learned from his years of experience that sometimes the most crucial choices weren't contained in any manual. Parker summoned an urgent conference with his senior staff after seeing the bear, and the debate was heated, with differing views on whether it was too dangerous to. Others felt they had a moral duty to look into it, especially since the cubs were leaving the base security for what could be a wild goose chase. Engaged, the discussion went on until Sergeant Miller made a startling observation. The bear's agitation was growing, and she displayed indications of. Parker experienced bodily anguish as he reflected on his 20 years in the military, during which he had encountered numerous emergencies, natural disasters, and war situations. But this time, however, it wasn't about military strategy or etiquette. Rather, it was about doing the right thing. Observing his squad, he recognized Parker chose 4 of his most seasoned soldiers, including Sergeant, to form a small rescue team after considering their perspectives. They prepared themselves with medical supplies, emergency meals, tranquilizer weapons, and survival gear because of Miller's experience in wildlife. No one knew what. Parker created stringent procedures and arranged a communication schedule with the people they could encounter, but they had to be ready for everything before departing. The base prepared a thorough map of their intended route based on the bear's tracks, made arrangements for emergency support in case it was required, and the remaining soldiers would. As they got ready to depart, the bear's behavior drastically changed. She became more vigilant at the base, ready to react if something went wrong. More lively, as though knowing that they had decided to assist her in her suffering, and her distress cry changed to gentle huffs, and she started to continuously go towards the tree line. It would be difficult to check back and make sure they were tracking, because the snowstorm had gotten worse, making it harder to see. Dangerous terrain. The bear's trail revealed that she had traveled from the northwest across some of the region's most difficult terrain, which the team would need to. The scenario was made much more difficult by the impending darkness, steep inclines, and potentially unstable ice formations in the dense forest. They would only have a few hours of daylight before darkness set in Alaska during the winter, making their quest considerably riskier. Parker. The bear appeared to comprehend their difficulties and went at a speed that permitted them to follow securely, even though she knew they were racing against time. The team was still in awe at her behavior, periodically pausing to make sure they were still behind her. This was no mindless animal, but a creature displaying. As they ventured more into the wilderness, Parker discovered something more in the bear's track, which revealed her extraordinary intelligence and purpose. Whatever was causing her to seek human assistance must have been extremely essential for her to repeat after making this trek several times in the last few days. As they traveled through the jungle on this taxing journey, the squad kept radio communication with the base, reporting their position every 15 minutes. In status, the bear guided them over routes that appeared to have been specifically selected for human use, avoiding the most deadly dangers of the winter environment following. After nearly 2 hours of meticulous tracking, they arrived at a spot where the ground started to shift, revealing a small clearing from the dense woodland and the behavior of the bear. Grew more aroused and moved more quickly, her strong muscles tense with expectation as the Reed team checked their equipment one. As they got closer to the clearing, none of them realized that whatever they were about to learn had compelled a wild animal to do the unimaginable. Trust people. Were ready for the horrifying image that would await them. What the rescue crew discovered in that area would haunt them for years to come, imprisoned in Anne. A relic from Alaska's gold rush era, the ancient abandoned mine pit had 2 bear cubs that were hardly moving in the bitter cold. Fell through a concealed aperture and dropped almost 15 feet into the frozen pit, creating a lethal trap for the young bears. The walls of the mother bear had been forced to watch since the shafts were too small for her to reach down and assist them, and too steep and smooth for them to climb out. The situation was considerably more dire than they had anticipated, and her cubs were fighting for their lives miserably. They had been stranded for what seemed to be. The mother's footprints around the shaft over a few days demonstrated that she had made every effort to get to them. The ground was ripped apart by her frantic. Broken branches and digging attempts indicated that she had attempted to shove them into the hole so her cubs could swiftly climb out, Sergeant Miller said. Evaluated the cubs' health. They were extremely dehydrated and exhibiting symptoms of hypothermia. The smaller cub was whimpering weakly and wasn't moving much. Sounds that devastated even the most resilient warriors in attendance. The mother bear's behavior was obviously waning quickly, while the larger cub was a little more active. It now made perfect sense why she had taken the extreme step of turning to the only creatures she knew for assistance after trying every other avenue to save her cubs. She's shown exceptional intellect in selecting a military base with its equipment and trained personnel, knowing that she might be able to reach them. Instinct Lieutenant Parker radioed the base right away to ask for more rescue gear. They needed a portable heating system, ropes, and harnesses. The temperature was rapidly lowering as darkness got closer to the crew, making it crucial to keep the cubs from going into shock during the rescue. They started their rescue effort right away, but the 15-foot deep excavation into the frozen ground caused several difficulties because its walls were slippery. Years of erosion and ice had made the building dangerously fragile. One mistake could result in a total collapse, burying the cubs forever. Since the winter sun was already lowering and creating long shadows, Lieutenant Parker gave his men the order to immediately install emergency lights around the shaft's entrance. They had to work quickly through the trees, but hurrying could be deadly since the mother bear was watching them every step of the way, and her breath was becoming little clouds in the cold. Sergeant Miller's evaluation of the issue, which she made with anxiety as she moved from paw to paw, showed further complications, including the temperature at the bottom of the cubs had spent days in the hole, which was well below freezing, and the walls were too small for an adult to safely descend. And employing mechanical devices may cause a cave-in, therefore they would have to depend on their basic rescue gear and meticulous preparation while the crew unpacked their equipment, making a thorough inventory of their resources. They had emergency blankets, rescue ropes, harnesses, and basic medical supplies employing these easy instruments. They would try something that had never been done before, such as saving wild bear pups from a mining pit as their mother observed the first step. Entailed protecting the area surrounding the hole. The soldiers meticulously removed any loose snow and debris before establishing a strong anchor point to aid in their rescue. Because the earth next to the shaft's edge could collapse at any time, every movement of the ropes was planned, and Mother Bear's continual presence added another element of. Due to the pressure of their task, the crew had to think quickly and alter their existing rescue equipment in order to create a bear cub rescue harness. The greater difficulty would be using emergency blankets to make a safe cradle that could hoist the cub without adding to the stress or injury. Putting the terrified cub in the harness, the stronger cub, despite being exhausted from the experience, still shown signs of life, monitored the rescue harness's descent while emitting little whimpers that reverberated up the shaft walls. The mother bear reacted to these sounds, accompanied by gentle huffs of encouragement, as if they somehow understood that this odd piece of equipment was intended to assist in lowering the harness that needed steady. With 2 troops in charge of the main line and another managing the exact control in hands, the squad employed a pulley system to guarantee seamless movement. The most severe safety backup was the short shaft, which allowed little room for error. Any swing or abrupt movement may harm the shaky walls or injure the cub. Despite its weariness, the stronger cub displayed normal wild animal anxiety of the unfamiliar item when the harness finally reached the bottom. Minutes felt like hours as the team watched in apprehension as the cub cautiously examined the harness, hoping the small bear would finally comprehend. Whether by luck or instinct, this was its opportunity to survive. The cub finally took its place, maybe inspired by its mother's constant, gentle noises. It nestled into the makeshift cradle from above, and the team took this opportunity to gently start the delicate process of fastening the harness around the cub's frail body. The mother bear's actions during these pivotal times astounded everyone in attendance. She maintained her composure while observing the rescue attempt using what? As if reminding herself to do so, she appeared to comprehend that her sole movements were tiny steps forward when her cub cried out, followed by fast steps back. The most hazardous aspect of the rescue was actually lifting the cub, so Lieutenant Parker positioned his men to trust these people with her baby's life. With one prepared with medical supplies, two on the main rope, and two handling safety lines, the mother bear's mounting worry was evident as her child began to rise, but she kept her gaze focused on her child's ascent. Each inch of advancement presented additional difficulties, and the cub became terrified of the team had to halt multiple times as the movement in the harness started to struggle, sending tiny showers of ice and mud down the shaft walls with each twist and turn. Sometimes allowing the cub to settle down before moving farther could prevent the shaft walls from collapsing or the harness from becoming tangled due to the cold. Despite wearing heavy gloves, the solder's hands were becoming numb, and the ropes had become stiff and difficult to grip. Formed on sections of the shaft wall, creating potentially hazardous areas where the harness could rip or catch. The team overcame these obstacles by halfway up, they encountered their first significant difficulty when a portion of the wall abruptly fell away, knowing they couldn't afford any blunders. The team had to decide quickly whether to keep lifting steadily or risk a faster draw as pieces of frozen earth fell towards the second cub below. That may destabilize the entire shaft but could protect the cub from falling debris. Parker's command was clear and concise, and he made steady progress. Years of military service taught him that hasty choices and fear may potentially jeopardize both cubs. The soldiers trusted his judgment and kept up their cautious. And in spite of the heart-stopping noises of debris striking the bottom of the shaft, Mother Bear's response to this emergency was remarkable when she naturally moved forward when the wall crumbled, but she had to push herself to stop. Her behavior demonstrated incredible trust by remaining back even as the first cub approached the surface, new issues surfaced because of the chilly air, and her natural instincts must have been screaming for her to run forward and help her cub. Caused ice to build on the rope, making it more difficult to grip. The crew had to coordinate perfectly, shifting places to keep control while, as it approached the surface, sensing freedom but still imprisoned in the increasingly slick apparatus, the cub's movement became more unpredictable. When the first cub eventually surfaced in a new harness after what felt like hours, but was actually only around 40 minutes, the situation was tense. The crew proceeded with extreme caution because they knew that this would be the first time the mother bear saw someone handling her child directly. Motherly instincts could take control at any time, so Sergeant Miller took the initiative to carefully remove the harness while speaking in a calm and gentle tone. Despite its weakness, the cub had signs of life that relieved everyone in the room. Its fur was matted with dirt and ice, but a first check revealed no severe wounds. In addition to fatigue and exposure to the cold, the mother bear's response at witnessing the safe rescue of her first cub was unmatched by the soldiers. Ever seen, she gently approached, making gentle noises that her cub instantly responded to. After a brief check of her infant, she took action. Totally unexpectedly, she glanced at Miller and then back at the shaft, making it obvious that her second cub still required assistance. The crew and the equipment had suffered as a result of the successful rescue of the first cub. The ropes were beginning to show wear from ice and friction, and the second cub, who was weaker and smaller than its sibling, was still trapped below, and its health had gotten worse. But there was no time to waste. Seemed much more serious, but the second cub's condition was much worse. The team had tried to save its sibling, but the smaller cub had become weaker. The young bear was hardly moving at the bottom of the pit, and the conditions had gotten worse due to fallen debris from the initial rescue, which partially buried it in loose dirt. Lieutenant Parker realized they needed a new strategy as the ice time was running out, since the walls of the shaft were too unstable for another harness rescue. After a brief evaluation, he decided to go against all military advice and summon someone because the cub was too weak to assist itself onto the rescue apparatus. Would have to descend into the shaft, where the walls might collapse at any time due to the massive risks and very low temperature. There was no assurance that the mother bear would stay composed with a human so near her cub when night fell, but they were left with no other option. It was either. As the team's wildlife specialist, Sergeant Miller immediately rushed forward, knowing that he had the best chance of either trying a direct rescue or seeing the cub perish. The others swiftly adjusted their rescue equipment to securely handle the cub, devising a plan to lower Miller headfirst into the narrow. The mother bear appeared to sense the heightened urgency as she approached the shaft and watched him open while holding him fast with several safety ropes. Instead of acting aggressively at this direct intervention, Miller's behavior continued to astound the crew as they prepared him for his drop. Kept her surprising faith in their work, Miller's descent was excruciatingly slow as the shaft walls collapsed at each step, throwing out constant torrents of. Farther downward, the area was so small that Miller could hardly move his arms, and the temperatures at the bottom were even lower than they had anticipated. The terrifying fact that portions of the wall were already starting to collapse was revealed by the beam from his headlamp, and arriving at the cub was just the. At the start of their difficulties, Miller had to dig around the cub with one hand because the little bear was partially buried and not responding. Every movement he made while staying in the shaft resulted in additional dirt and ice falling, endangering his position and the cub's total elevation. Ground things were becoming more tense. The mother bear had started to pace, making quiet noises that grew more agitated as she felt her cubs crucial. Given that they were now in charge of 2 lives in the precarious shaft, the team closely watched their safety lines. The moment Miller eventually, it was both a relief and a fresh source of concern to arrive to the cub. The small bear was cold, and its breathing was faint and erratic. He hastily wrapped it in an emergency thermal blanket, holding it close to him to exchange his body heat. But when they started to drag Miller and the cub up, the most hazardous phase of the climb began. When calamity struck, a sizable portion of the shaft wall abruptly collapsed, sending a cascade of frozen earth tumbling downward. The team dragged harder as they fought against time. And physics, his training kicked in, and Miller coiled his body over the comrade as the entire structure started to fall around him. The mother bear's roars reverberated across the clearing as the team above pulled with everything they had, with Cub shielding it from the falling debris. She maintained her stance as though realizing that any intervention at this point would endanger both her youngster and its rescuer. The last seconds of the rescue turned. The squad tugged with everything they had, their muscles straining under Miller's weight in a frantic race against the collapsing shaft. As the old mining shaft started its last collapse, the sound of crumbling earth and shattering timber filled the air, along with the cub and the falling debris. Came out of the shaft seconds before it collapsed, still holding the still cub to his chest when a sudden blast of icy air struck. The shaft vanished behind them as the team swiftly dragged them out of the hazardous location. Decades of abandonment eventually claimed it in a cloud of snow and dust. But there was no time to rejoice over the tight escape because the cub's little body had grown dangerously cold and its breathing wasn't working properly. Heartbeat was weak and erratic, and despite her fear of the infant, the mother bear's concern was evident as she felt the baby's catastrophic condition approaching. In response to this unexpected situation, the crew immediately established an emergency care room using their military skills. Sergeant, the medical supplies intended for human situations would suddenly be utilized to save the life of a cub bear, using their portable heaters to create a warm environment. Together with the team's medic, Miller, who was still covered in mud and ice from the tunnel, meticulously cleaned the cub's airways and wrapped it in special. The mother bear observed every action as her first cub cuddled against her and started the delicate process of warming its body temperature using thermal blankets. The following hours turned into a bloody struggle against time, with both of them concentrating attentively on the people trying to save their family member. Worked in shifts, providing continuous care and using heating pads, warm water bottles, and even their own bodies to monitor the cub's vital signs. Heat to gradually return the cub's temperature to normal. Every little victory was praised, every setback was addressed with fresh vigor Throughout it happened, the mother bear stayed near, and her behavior only got more amazing when the cub displayed symptoms of distress. She would make quiet noises that appeared to soothe it, When the soldiers needed to modify their medical gear, she would take a small step back, as though to give them room to exercise her trust. As nightfall drew near, the squad encountered yet another difficulty. Their emergency supplies were running low, and these humans, who had previously been her natural foes, never faltered. Lieutenant Parker quickly decided to radio the base to bring more medical supplies and equipment for an emergency because the Cubs still need round-the-clock care. Prolonged field work, spending as much time as needed with these bears, the less pleasant times occurred when the Cubs' breathing would become erratic, leading to fear among the people and the mother bear at one especially. The small bear's terrifying episode ceased all breathing the teams. A medic carried out a careful operation to clean its airways while everyone is there. The mother bear's breath was held. Her tragic response was that she softened, sounds that are virtually begging for help, but reserving her approach to her cub, in some way realizing that the people were its greatest opportunity to live by. In the morning, both cubs displayed exceptional. The smaller cub had started to improve, react and move, but its sibling had recovered sufficient strength to drink water. The relief of the mother bear was evident in her easygoing demeanor and kind conversations with her children for the next 3 days. The group kept their camp, offering round-the-clock care while the mother bear remained while the cubs recovered. Slowly take in food and water from the troops she had built confidence with, an unparalleled connection between wild creature and people. When the cubs were at last having the strength to walk, the mother bear was ready to guide them back via the wilderness. But prior to departing, she went up to something fantastic. Lieutenant Parker halted a few steps away and maintained eye contact for a number of long moments. Later, she turned with a gentle huff before guiding her cubs into the woods. Getting lost in the trees, the incident altered military procedure in the area permanently. The base initiated a thorough investigation of abandoned mines, websites protecting dozens of comparable risks. They set up a new wildlife response system, protocols that prioritize evaluation and rescue as opposed to quick defense measures. Years later, base soldiers would sometimes you can notice a big female bear with 2 robust cubs in the background, even if they weren't positive it was. These bears never displayed the same family hostility towards people. Instead of appear to have a special bond, comprehension with the base employees. The mother bear's narrative, amazing faith in the bravery of the soldiers. Rescue became widespread among the military, and it was demonstrated by wildlife conservation groups that occasionally the most amazing deeds of it takes guts to believe in the good of others, even those who were instructed to be afraid. In lieu of Lieutenant, what would you have done? What would you have trusted about Parker's position, your gut, and assisted those in need? Tell us what you think, Mother Bear, Thank you for reading the comments below. Please don't forget to like and subscribe. Additional amazing real-life accounts of amazing interactions with animals.